Alright, we are back for part B with Lee. Every time I see your name, I can't help but remember the Tenacious D song. I'm sure you've heard that a million times by now. Yeah,
Yep.
Lee, 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 Lee. Anyways, it's a great song, actually. So, viewers at home, unfortunately, when Lee rejoined the call, the audio is a little quiet on his end, so you might have to turn it up just a little bit to hear. Actually, I will turn my mic down just a little bit. That way, it hopefully will normalize for whoever's watching at home. You just might have to turn it up a little bit. So, where we last left Lee, we were um, picking your brain apart. And
Pretty. Yep.
so, what do you think are some weaknesses of your personality, regardless of what you think your type is? What do you think trips you up most often? And it may or may not be stereotypical to your type. It just might be something that happens to you.
Um, Sometimes like going back to loss, talking about loss. Sometimes the simplest loss will mess up the whole game for me. When it just in a day, or an average day, some little thing will happen that'll mess my head up, my mental up for the day. That takes me sometimes the whole day to get back to my confident, my normal mode, and I always it's the Groundhog Day reoccurring lesson of well, duh. It's just it was a small loss doesn't define the day. You just like in sports, they scored a goal on you, whatever. Not to keep going back to sports as an analogy, but that will kind of that's definitely a weakness. I'll take one loss, maybe sort of mess up the whole day because I let it. When it's like, hey, there's plenty of opportunities. The day isn't over. It's only the first hour or something. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something I'll take. Not the best, although I've improved. So
And what is it about loss particularly that messes with you?
I don't know. I think it slows you down. It gets in the way of what you're trying to do. When sometimes to our earlier conversation, it becomes the way to better what you want to do, like accepting the failure or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And no one escapes it, but you wake up, you're ready to kick some ass, and then something like that can slow you down or distract or just like totally ruin you wanting to go kick ass, so to speak. So that's where it trips me up. Versus if I have a flawless day and I'm just kicking butt, but that's not how life is all the time. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in the intensity of the moment, in the middle of it, you forget that. So,
What would you say? And this is not directly tied to sports and loss, but it's
sure.
kind of related because sports does have a relationship with authority figures.
Yeah,
What is your relationship with authority figures? How do you interact with authorities?
not too well.
Not too well.
Well, depending on the authority figure, like for example, I think right now in this situation, you're an authority figure. You're
Mm.
the person conducting this.
Mm-hmm.
If I respect the authority theater, then there's no issues. But if I don't, it goes back to the bullshit detection of is this guy a fraud? Is this guy for real? That sort of thing. So when it's like if it's if I'm playing on a team with Michael Jordan and he's the boss or Tom Brady or whoever, or does you pick if I'm working for Jeff Bezos, it's gonna be hard for me to rebel against Jeff Bezos. He kind of like I think he's doing pretty good. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's someone that they've demonstrated their results, or
Yeah.
you can just tell like with a person if it's authority means they're in charge, they're the leader, you have to follow. So you decide do you want to follow or not, and
Right. Right. Right.
so in your case, I can tell, and although we're still getting to know each other, versed in MBTI than I am. So until I maybe smell something, not that I'm looking for something, but if I smell something weird, then that's when, of course, rebellion comes out. But right
Mm-hmm.
now, you're kicking butt, so that's why
Thanks.
that's why I'm not trying to be a little hacker or a little, pain in the ass. But yeah, so I think it just depends on. I mean, I'm sure everybody has met like a teacher or someone that's supposed to be their leader, and it's like goes back to the bullshit thing. It's like I'm supposed to be following your guidance, and if you're an idiot, then I'm following an idiot. For lack of a
Right.
better, I know I'm kind of, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
one one detail or one flaw makes someone an idiot, but
I'm trying to find a piece of paper because I'm gonna write down for you what I think your type is, but I just realized that I moved my scrap over to the others to another
uh,
spot. I gotta grab it. So hey, this is you get to fill the space for the viewers at home. You
uh,
get to say whatever you want to say. Oh, please don't abuse this.
won't say anything politically incorrect unless they want that. So I think your
I
fans
don't know
want
what I don't know what you said, but I'm gonna have to watch it on the video now.
nothing, but I think your fans want more politically incorrectness. I think that's what they want.
Oh really?
No, I'm teasing.
I was gonna say, we'll have to see in the comments. Am I
No,
not politically incorrect enough? It's funny because I really want to be. I really I have viewpoints that are not like that are polarizing. But I can't help but feel in a channel like this, it's best not to do it just because
yeah,
the topic isn't anything political. So it's kind
yeah,
of hard to. It, I just realized I didn't grab my pen, but I don't want to shut people off to talk about things like personality just because they might
yeah,
disagree with me on my politics.
yeah. It's kind of waste your time when it's not your focus, right?
Right.
So,
I mean, I have that is my focus in other areas of my
oh,
life. So
right.
it's just for this particular channel, you know.
Oh, yeah,
So yeah. One second. All right. I got my pen. Um, so my opinion didn't really change. You know, you'll see when you watch the video that I had an opinion like pretty early on. I think, um, and not because you necessarily fit any stereotypes, but because I recognize certain cognitive functions in people sooner than I do other ones because they're familiar.
no,
um, what's it?
that helps. That
Yeah.
helps, and I don't mind being stereotyped. Please stereotype me. I want to know. I'd rather be that. Yeah, that's the freaking cheetah for real. Listen,
Right. So I don't know if you're going to be surprised at all what I've written on here, whether you think that I'm going to guess it right, or if you have a guess at what you think what type you think you are already, or even if you know confidently. So what
yeah.
level of confidence do you say that you are in your type at this point right now?
Um, above 50%, like in the 70%
Okay.
range. I'm torn between three different ones
Okay. What are
that
the
I've been.
what are the three? And you'll see that I'm not messing with the paper here, so I won't cheat. But what are the three types that you're kind of contemplating?
Both STPs and ENTP.
Okay. Okay.
That's where I'm, and that's what some other leaders in the community like yourself have typed me as, in that category too.
Okay. And are you leaning towards any of those three?
Man, I feel I don't know. I feel really on the fence of the STP. Like some days I feel introverted, even though TI and SE are obviously two different things. But then some days I feel I don't know. I really have a confusion. My biggest issue is the TI and SE is my see the stronger one and TI
Mm.
is backup, or is the
Mhm.
TI running? Because I always feel TI. I'm always saying idiot, get away, stupid. You know that the TI I feel very close to. So I'm always lost, and I always watching so much content, reading so much, and been typing a
Yeah.
few different times.
Right. Right.
And so, but then I always think I see a lot of people debate about ENTPs and ISTPs being similar, like
Mhm.
Bruce Lee and Frank Zappa.
Mhm.
Some say he's ENTP, some say ISTP,
Mhm.
and so there's so much similarity, especially ESTP, ENTP, because they're both kind of system hackers, for lack of a better term, and
Sure.
you know, ISTP too. It's so close, all these ones, but that's sort of where I lay.
So I can help you probably put one of those to bed right now, and that's based on that test that I gave you earlier in the part A. Do you remember that? You did really kind of poorly on the first one, and you did okay on the second one. You remember that?
Yeah, that was uh,
The first
that
one
was
was
pretty
the
tough.
5 different uses of wire, and the second one was tell me the things these have in common.
Yeah, yeah, the wire thing was
The
tough.
wire one. So that's the wire one is something that someone who uses extroverted intuition a lot would probably be really good at, or probably be
Uh,
better at. So I think if you were an ENTP, you would probably have done a lot better with that one, rather than having just literally nothing.
uh, okay.
So I just
Yeah,
want to throw that out there because extroverted intuition is really good at just kind of throwing out a bunch of shit. Just a lot of ideas, a lot of possibilities, and like it comes very naturally. Um, they may not all be good ones. They may not all be
yeah.
feasible. They may not all be reasonable, but they're just a lot of ideas, and ENTPs. My son's an ENTP, and he's full of them. You know what I mean? Like
Wow.
I could sit and ask him a question. He could just that prompt could give him 1,000 different thoughts to talk about.
Is he tough to, for lack of a better term, control because he's ENTP? Because he can
No,
escape anything?
no,
No.
I don't think so. ENTPs are actually less, in my point of view, less stubborn than the type that I think you are. um, and I think that's a consequence of introverted intuition. So I think introverted intuition, and I'm an
Uh,
NI dom, so I mean, speaking from experience, being a very stubborn person myself, is introverted intuition gets its own ideas, and it gets kind of stuck on those ideas sometimes, and it's kind of hard to shake people who use introverted intuition off of their ideas. Unless you have a really good,
yeah.
I mean, if you're a TI user, then you have a really good argument, then you can. But if you're an INTJ, then maybe the rationale might need to be different than it is if you're um, an STP, for example, using NI. But the point will still remain that you have a knowing, and you're sort of it's you have that knowing. It's yours. It's sort of your personal knowing, and yeah, and you just have to be convinced otherwise to be able
Yeah,
to abandon that
I
because
have
that's your
a
knowing.
hunch you're,
I'm sorry, what was
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. I kind of had a hunch you might be INFJ or
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I am an
INTP or
INFJ.
something like that.
INFJ. So
Ah,
so what do you think I guessed you as? What do you think I guessed? Use your intuition and tell me what you think I guessed.
probably because I'm cracking jokes, ESTP, and I'm talking and I'm
I don't think it's
putting
because you're
stuff
cracking.
out.
I don't think it's because you're cracking jokes. I mean, you definitely did get that right. Okay, there it is. Um, so yeah, so it's not about like, oh, you're cracking jokes, so you're an extrovert or something, because I mean that's irrelevant to me. It really has to
Right.
do. So I mean, right off the bat, I was pretty confident you were NITI, just because of you have a very like I don't know how to I can't this is a difficult one to describe, but I can tell the difference between an NITE user and an NITI user for some reason, and I can't explain why always, but maybe it's because I'm an NITI user, and what is an ESTP but a sort of another kind of variant of INFJ and ISTP and ENFJ, so it's like you can recognize when I meet people in the same quadra, so to speak, I can sense a lot of similarities in how we're
Yep.
processing information. um, I can hear a lot of myself in the other person, even if I know that you don't
Yeah.
have the same. You have different aptitudes than I do, but you clearly have more of an extroverted sensing preference than I do. So, but I know that you have an
Yeah.
extroverted sensing preference because I know what an introverted sensing preference sounds like to because I know enough people like that. So that's such a fuzzy thing to say, right? But I think you have a very strong sense of like generalities and truth, which is an NI thing to do, and you also have a very like um, obviously a strong connection to your body and a strong ability to sort of control your body, and be able to use your body
Yeah.
in ways that you want it to move in, and that's something I struggle with because people, INFJs and INTJs have the inferior extroverted sensing, and it causes a weird kind of gridlock to happen with the body, and you try to tell it to do things, and it doesn't want to necessarily always do it. So it makes for very difficult some kinds of activities to be difficult. Like I'm good at like action. I can be good at action games and stuff like that. Like Galaga, I'm really good at and stuff. But I really have to get into a sense of flow. I have to be really able to just let go and be in that state. But it doesn't come necessarily very naturally to me. Like I was never good at sports. Even if I tried, I played a lot of basketball when I was younger. I just could was never. I couldn't I would think my body to go do something a certain way, and I could never get it to do that. Um,
Mm.
so I kind of compare that to my brother's an ISTP, so I know what an ISTP is like. I know people of like almost all the types very intimately, and that helps to some degree because I can kind of calculate where certain people seem to fit in a spectrum of that. But to me, you also seem to have very clear extroverted feeling preference to me. But I think that's all the three types you were thinking about obviously have that.
Yeah.
So really, if your question was down to, you know, STP versus ENTP, I mean, I think to me it's pretty obvious. So I'll give you that as my opinion. That's just an opinion,
Yep.
that it would be an STP. But as far as ISTP versus ESTP, my brother's an ISTP. Um, I find that ISTPs are harder to get to know and harder to understand than ESTPs, um, and also to some degree struggle a little bit with acting uh, um, as as
I mean,
as fluidly as ESTPs can.
right.
ESTPs are sort of in the world and part of the world and moving with the world in a very fluid, dynamic kind of way, and ISTPs are they can play in that world, but they're more calculated in a way, but not the way that an NI Dom would be, but just like they're definitely stopping a lot more to think of what's happening than an ESTP probably will. Um, that's such a fuzzy thing to say. I keep saying
Yeah.
that, but so maybe this is helpful, maybe not. Um, but I think if you were an ISTP, um, well, you have like very strong aptitude towards extroverted sensing, and it's hard to get away from that. It's not that an ISTP won't do that; obviously
Yeah.
they will, but they're
Right.
not going to necessarily be as good at it as an ESTP will. And it seems to me that you're pretty good at it, just from anecdotally. Obviously, I've only known you for what 45 minutes, right? But you know, your story checks out in my opinion, and that's just my intuition speaking. So,
Yeah.
um, if I had to guess, I mean, I wasn't at any point thinking ISTP honestly. So, um, I actually put you'll rewatch the video and see that I put the question mark on ESTP like in the first 5 minutes probably. Um, so I think the other thing is I've met other ESTPs, you know, and I've met them personally. I've met them in person and talked to them and spent time with them and have sensed the certain kind of way that they are. It's a very cool confidence, but it's also it's a lot of the same not suffering fools that TP types kind of do, but especially like INTPs do that, and ESTPs I think do it a lot. I think ESTPs are actually probably, let's see, who's more forgiving, ESTPs or INTPs? I don't know, but the TP types don't appreciate stupidity. Honestly, my son is the same way. Actually, my son is an ENTP. He watches stuff, and if it's he hates Michael Scott from The Office, for example. He hates that guy. You want to know? He hates that character. You want to know why? Because Michael Scott's a buffoon. He's an idiot. And for whatever reason, my son just does not. He does not like watching an idiot be an idiot. He wants to watch a character that's smart and makes smart decisions. So I just noticed that seems to be something I've seen consistently in the TP types, is that they are not a huge fan of suffering fools. And I think probably the FPs would probably be a little more. The FPs and the FJs are probably going to be a little more understanding about foolishness. So.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. Although I do, one of my tightest people is INFJ, and I think because it's the opposite in cognition, I really respect INFJs. I really, maybe because they have the strong NI, it helps me ease that. I'll tell you this. This might be interesting. 5 days a week, no lies. I have a dream like I'm in some sort of action hero movie, and like the world's coming to get me, like I'm Will Smith or something. And I don't know, when I meet an INFJ, they just sort of calm that. I don't know. The INFJ I look at as like the wise monk that always, if ever there's fear, you go to an INFJ, the INFJ will clear that up real quick. I feel maybe that's a little stereotypical, but
It's probably stereotypical of like a mature INFJ.
right.
A young INFJ is very different. A young INFJ is foolish and confused, and no one likes them. INFJs really are late bloomers. They really have to come into their own, and then they're like adults in child bodies, and that's sort of the problem, is that they're have difficulty relating with other people at a young age, and then they get old enough to be allowed to be adults. So. I don't know if I cut out there, if you heard me.
I can understand that, yeah. Yeah, because there's a little bit of static, but
Yeah.
I heard you.
Okay.
No, yeah, that would make total sense. I mean, yeah, the level of maturity to have I think a high FE is crazy, right? So that's probably the most mature thing, like the FE at its highest level. So, well, second highest in your case, right? But ENFJ, FE is first slot, right? So that's, yeah. I forget the point I'm trying to make. But,
well, you said your friend was an INFJ.
Other people feeling,
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was your friend? What is your friendship like with your INFJ friend?
We're kind of like, he comes to me for adventure and risk taking, so to speak, and not to make it stereotype, but sort of like Bart Simpson. He's like Lisa Simpson,
Yeah.
and hopefully he would laugh if he. I don't know. There's a commonality. Maybe it's the TI, but
Hmm.
it's if I say something quote unquote offensive, he laughs. He doesn't. He can really
Right.
take a punch. If I tease him or say something, he is probably amazing at taking a jab. Just even if loving or even if it's kind of a hard critical jab, he
Yeah.
really can
It's probably
handle
because
it.
he knows
He's
where
one of the few people.
you're coming from. That's
Go
why.
ahead.
Yeah, his intuition is telling you he knows where you're coming from. So he knows how to take it. That's why.
Yeah, it's hard to piss him off. I've tried, and it's I can't do it. I've tried to tease him.
you
I've called. Go
I'll
ahead. Sorry.
tell you how to piss him off. Just bully someone in front of him. Then you'll piss him off.
Uh,
That's all you have to do. Not to say that you should go piss off your INFJ friend, but I'm just saying if you wanted
uh,
to know how to piss off an INFJ, that's how you do it.
yeah. No, I remember we were in the car. I was taking him out to eat, and I've never seen. He was twitching and scared, and I'm zooming in and out of traffic. And it's casual. I'm like talking to him. I'm like, and he's freaking out over it. And I was like, dude, we're not even. It was in my belief. Of course, there's two sides to every story. But when I was weaving in and out of cars, it wasn't even close. It was just basic driving. But it was really affecting him,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize that. Yeah, maybe I should stop that. But he's very. I admire the admiration. I think there's a mutual admiration. I think we disagree morally on a lot of things and
Hmm.
how things should be handled. But there's a mutual admiration. I admire his patience and his ease, and he's very wise about. I don't know. He lets. I don't know. I feel like we sort of supply what the other one lacks. Maybe it's because
Hmm.
of the opposite cognition order, maybe. But
Yeah.
yeah, I feel I get out of him. I don't know. I feel I learn just being around, not even actively seeking questions. I don't know. I feel
Hmm.
a calmness around him. But I think that's stereotypically the INFJ role to society, right? If there's a stereotype, is to sort of be the peaceful, mature one. Someone's got to do it, right?
Well, the thing is, I think all the INFJs are probably all in hiding, so it's probably the ISFJs that are probably out there in society doing it.
Uh,
We all owe a debt
right.
to the ISFJs, honestly, for all the good things that they do.
Yeah, serious.
Like they're probably all the ones that
Oh,
are taking care of the all the people that are sick with COVID and everything. It's probably a lot of ISFJs out
yeah,
there doing the work.
yeah. ISFJs, if there's any watching, you guys are stronger than you think, man. Those
Yeah.
are tough,
My best friend is an
tough, tough.
ISFJ. My best friend of 20
Really?
years, ISFJ.
Wow.
And actually,
That must be interesting.
I posted a post on a Facebook group, but I was my post was like I really wish they would stop talking about INFJs and ENTP or INFJs and ENFJ. Sorry, fuck, INFJs and INTPs and INFJs and ENFPs. Those are the two types that get talked about a lot as far as like a pair with INFJ, and I think now, I know some people have had bad experiences. Some INFJs have had bad experiences with ISFJs because it was like a parent or something. But like that, an ISFJ parent for an INFJ may or may that's a 50-50 gamble right there. It could be a bad thing, it could be a good thing. But an ISFJ friend or an ISFJ best friend for an INFJ is like peas in a pod. So for everybody watching, INFJ and ISFJ is a great match. It's a great matchup for friends and for a long friendship. So just want to throw that out there. That's my experience. Oh,
Yeah,
so I don't know if you have comment on that,
ISFJ.
but what's
No,
it?
super.
What was it?
No. Super underrated ISFJ. Can you hear me?
I'm getting a little bit of static. I'm gonna actually kill my
Hello.
VP. I'm gonna kill my VPN. See if that gets better. So hold on 1 second. All right, friends at home. Test, test. All right. Hopefully that's better. We'll find out.
Check 2.
Yep. Yeah. So you were talking up ISFJs as well, and I'm in agreement with you. I think they're humanity's unsung hero. They're probably the ones who they're the ones who are better than all of us.
Yeah, they're just as solid. They're the, I don't know how to
Salt
say
of the earth.
Yeah, they're concrete, man. They're tough. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Most,
tough as nails, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. My mom's an ISFJ, and it's weird. It's the soft, nice, pleasantness, cliche stereotypes, of course, but
Yeah.
there's also that just toughness, that no quit, can take anything,
Mhm.
amazing, just
Mhm.
phenomenal. Like, man, you talk about support, that's crazy. So,
Definitely.
God
Definitely.
bless you, ISFJs.
Yes, we salute you.
We
Um.
want to give you money.
So I
We
at
want to
the
buy you stuff.
yes, right. Buy your ISFJ a present.
If anyone listening, if you know an ISFJ, buy them stuff immediately. Just
On
purchase.
typologygifts.com. Go to typologygifts.com and
Yes,
buy.
typologygifts.com.
Um.
Definitely.
Hey, so at the end of these videos, I always open it up to for you to ask any questions you want to ask me. So if there's any, I don't know, any curiosity, you've got my ear now. Here we are, and go for it.
Wow.
And I hope it's not embarrassing, but it's probably okay if it's embarrassing too.
No, no, I'm kidding. Let's see. SDP. Yes. Okay. I had a confusion with the. They say ESTP 4-slot NI
Mhm.
is when stressed or weak is they say paranoid, I guess, can't put the pieces together what's happening, shell shock, which I relate to at times. But the ENTP, the SI is the 4-slot, and they
Mhm.
say when an ENTP is in that mode by stress or whatever, it's gets to be a hypochondriac. It's worried, oh, do I have cancer because I got a sore throat? I can relate to that too. That's my thing with that. Like sometimes when I have some wrong, I don't know what's wrong. But is an STP capable of not understand, or is that part of having a weakened eye? Oh, I got a jaw ache, but I didn't trace it back to I just ate an apple, but I think I have cancer. Is that something an STP can be weak about? I guess.
I mean, the thing is, like, below the first three slots, I'm usually like, you're using everything below that as you're using those any of those things below that pretty infrequently or less frequently or less adequately. um, so I think that it's not outrageous to think that that ENTPs or ESTPs would prefer would exhibit similar fourth slot. I don't know. I don't know how accurate the whole exact everything about the cognitive functions is the way I would put it. I don't think it fits necessarily so neatly into that box necessarily. I think when I'm trying to type somebody, I'm trying to find out how easily certain cognitive functions come to you because that probably just means you've used it more and more likely that's the logical conclusion I have to come to, but I don't think that means that necessarily, like, you could go for a year and exhibit behavior of a completely different type, but maybe over the course of your lifetime you've clearly preferred certain cognitive functions and are therefore very good at those ones. So when I try to type you, I'm trying to find those ones,
The strong ones.
the strong ones, right? So that doesn't mean you don't use introverted sensing. That doesn't mean you don't use extroverted intuition. It just means you might not use it enough to have a clear preference for it. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be a hypochondriac or that you're not going to go into SI mode for some reason, because I do. I mean, I'm an INFJ. I'll go clean the house sometimes when I'm stressed. I'll get worried about my body sometimes. Like everybody, I think, does it to a degree. We all use both of our hands all the time, but we say that we have handedness too. You know what I mean? So like I'll hold a knife in my left hand and a fork in my right hand, or vice versa, but I'm using both hands, but I still say I'm handed somehow. So you're using all your cognitive functions, but the question is, what are you using most often, such to the point that your brain is like has cleared those paths through more frequently. You know, the myelin sheaths, right? Like you've built pathways between neurons more efficiently. So there are certain pathways that you have in your brain that you've done more and that you're better at, or that just you have aptitude for whatever reason, genetically or whatever. You have some uh, difference in your brain than someone else. So you prefer to behave a certain way. You prefer your body to move a certain way, and your face looks a certain way, and your body looks a certain way, and you have certain sized hands and eyes, and certain color eyes, and all these different genetic things about you that are physical. Some of them are mental, some of them are chemical, and some of them have to do with diseases and so on. And just the personality is just one more thing on all of those other things that is it has a tendency to behave a certain way, and you're not going to fit in a box. There's no Lee-sized box that can be described away. You're a unique universe of atoms and molecules, and you're the only one. They broke the mold, with you. So you have similarities, and you and I could say we're from the same species or the same place in the world or something, or the same gender. But at the end of the day, like I'm still completely unique, and so are you, and that's just the weird kind of reality of humanity. So I wouldn't look at those kinds of things and be like, well, I'm a hypochondriac and therefore I might be this type or that type, or I'm a this and that, and I don't think that's the right question to ask, probably. Like, I mean, I think it's more like, if you go to kick a tree, which leg did you raise off the ground, it's really about where did your brain go first, probably, and like, in most cases. And yeah, so I don't know, that might help give some clarity, but like,
Like a reaction, yeah. That kind of brings me to my next thought, because both of us are SE over SI.
yeah,
I guess that makes sense. I don't know if you feel this way or ever encounter this, because I know your SE is 4 slot, but I do better with the incoming. I don't know if this sounds very, like we talked about the ISFJ being very SI strong, able to take incoming information. For me, I feel like I'm not good at that. I feel like I'm good at combating that. Like, if information comes, I feel better confronting it, going on the offense, so to speak. I don't know
well,
if that feels familiar.
well, uh, yeah, yeah. So
I
you said,
see the information, but I need to control the information. I need to, like, no, I got to tell the joke. No, you
no, you're right. Extroverted sensing is really much more about controlling that sensory experience than it is about taking in that sensory experience. So much. I don't know how to describe that. It is about taking in the experience, but it is about controlling it. Look. I'll just tell you how an INFJ does it, okay? And you'll find the similarity right away. I'm pretty sure. I have behind me a door. You can see that door right there. That's my sensory deprivation room. I have painted the whole room black. I have blackout curtains in that room, and I go in that room and I turn all my senses off. So for me, sensory input is overwhelming, and too much of it is a lot for me. and I have to shut it off. But that's an extroverted sensing thing to want to control your sensory environment in that way and be able to modulate it kind of. So it
Right.
just so happens that for me to modulate it means I need to dial it down a lot, quite a bit,
Do you feel as an INFJ your sensory has gotten stronger over the years?
My discomfort from sensory input has gotten
Well,
stronger for some reason. I don't know why.
tolerance of it.
My
Do you think that's just
I
practice, experience,
I
maturity?
I think the way I would describe it is like I probably struggled with it before but didn't understand it and had no way of comprehending what the problem was and didn't know how to modulate it and didn't know how to deal with it. So for me it manifested as a lot of anxiety. It just exuded anxiety just exuded from me. And in my early 30s I took an MBTI test and I got an ENFJ, and then I was like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting. And then like a couple of years later, I took another one and I got INFJ, and I read the description, and I felt like somebody had followed me around like my whole life. I felt like somebody just went along and like wrote weird like little idiosyncrasies about me that I thought were just things about me, but they were like, oh, the INFJs do this, 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 and I'm like, oh shit, that's really fucking weird. So then I start looking into it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm starting to understand this. And it was through doing that, going through that exercise of trying to figure that stuff out, that that I stumbled upon this concept of the highly sensitive person. I don't know if you're familiar with that, HSP. Are you familiar with that concept? There's something called an HSP, a highly sensitive person. Generally it's NF. It's like NF types complaining about this problem. So it's like your ENFPs, your INFPs, your INFJs. Maybe less so your ENFJs, but like there's something going on where these NFs have this like kind of hypersensitivity, and it affects you in a lot of different ways. It's like emotional sensitivity and like physical sensitivity and kind of psychological sensitivity. It's just an oversensitivity. It's like you know how some scales are designed to be like a gram scale, and some scales are like a pound scale, and some scales are like to weigh trucks, right? And that's the best way I could describe it is
Yeah.
like NF types are like the gram scale, and then like STJ types are like the truck scale, and then like maybe like NT types are like the middle level scale or something. I don't know. And the STs are probably like probably somewhere in the middle, somewhere towards the higher end. I don't know. But like there's something about the sensory stimulation, overstimulation, whatever you want to call it, where it's like a lot of times I see it like ST types are like adrenaline junkies. Like they want more stimulation. Like the stimulation it feeds them. It's like if I don't have stimulation, it's a problem. Like I'm uncomfortable. I have to go get the stimulation. And then you have like the NF types that are like literally everything is stimulating me. I need to shut all of it out, and I need to get away from all that stimulation. So that seems to be the spectrum I'm seeing of personality types. Is that this sense of either wanting more stimulation or wanting less stimulation, or just kind of being okay. Like I think ISFJs are probably a type that are pretty okay with the level of stimulation, more or less, that they
Yeah.
get out of life. They don't necessarily seem to want a lot more of it, and I think ISTPs are probably like this too to some degree. Although they are kind of known as kind of somewhat of adrenaline junkies too, but ISFJs for sure are pretty cool with the level of stimulation they're getting for the most part, and they don't necessarily want less of it. They don't necessarily want more of it. So that's
So
how.
you,
Yeah.
so you think an ENFP, you would think by the book they would want more because the NE dom, right? Like wanting to gather more stuff. No.
Well, they want to gather more information, but maybe I guess what I'm thinking of is sensory stimulation. I think it's less likely probably for an ENFP to be a highly sensitive person, but I'm pretty sure I've seen like in like highly sensitive person groups, I've pretty sure I've seen ENFPs in there as well. But yeah, it's probably not as likely than as like INFPs, INFJs, and well, I've probably seen some ISFPs and some other types in those kinds of groups
Yeah.
too. So I don't think it's just one type or two types, but it's probably more likely feeling types, and it's probably more likely intuitive types. I guess that's the way I would put it.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see some ISFPs being in that for sure.
Hmm.
Um, well, that's pretty wild. What would you? I guess I'll wrap. I know you probably got some stuff to do, but what would you say? What did you give an ESTP any advice? What would you say for what I don't know, working on whether it's with weaknesses or whatever? I'm just curious your perspective. If you're like, you know, an ESTP gave you $10,000 to give the best piece of STP advice.
Oh,
Not
geez.
that I can do that, but
Oh man. I would
start a Kickstarter? No.
I would I would want to spend all day writing on that because I would want to make sure the $10,000 was well spent. um,
Fair enough. Fair
but
enough.
I guess I'm put on the spot to figure it out, right? Um,
We'll
so
make it 3,000.
3,000.
Well,
Like the thing about ESTPs is they're an interesting type because they're very versatile. So it's hard for me to be like, oh, you're so deficient in some area because ESTPs I think are very versatile in physicality. I think also in like connecting with people. I think they're very good at connecting with people. They're very rational people. And they kind of good at they're kind of good at taking the world as it comes and living in the moment. Honestly, I kind of wish I was an ESTP to be honest with you. If I had to choose, like maybe that would be among the types I might wish that I was, just because of all those things like that really strong ability to kind of be in the moment and live in the moment, live in the now. Um, so I guess the things I would say wouldn't have to do with you should change because I think you're fine the way you are, but I think if you had to work on the things that maybe you probably don't spend enough time thinking about, you know, maybe you could work on two different things. And one would be um, really building more systems for yourself so that you can make sure that you don't fall apart on the improvisational side of things. Like you might want to improvise a lot, but you might be missing some things somehow. You know, because you didn't plan well enough, or you didn't take the time to put a calendar event in, or didn't figure out the whatever you needed. You know, you're probably not probably not using a lot of extroverted thinking, right? So you probably don't necessarily think, well, step one, step two, step three, step four towards the goal, which I don't really a whole lot as much either. I kind of jump straight to the ending and then I work my way backwards a lot of times. But so this is advice for you and I, which is extroverted thinking, which is can you think sequentially towards that goal? Can you go step one, step two, step three, and then I can get to the goal? And can I trust experts? Which introverted thinkers, we're not going to be too great at that. We're going to be cherry picking our information, and we're going to be deciding who to trust, right? So that's a hard one.
yeah.
That's a hard one for me. Trusting experts. Well, I mean, I will trust an expert if I vetted them, if I believe they're an expert, like just like you. Um,
Yeah.
but there's a reason extroverted thinkers are so successful, and it's because they trust the experts. So
Yeah.
it's hard not to get away from that. Like, oh, if I just was willing to put my mind aside for just a second and be willing to trust people who seem to know better, I could potentially move faster. I don't know. So that comes from pragmatism. And can you be practical enough to do that? So I'm giving that advice to myself and to other INFJs watching as well. Okay. The other one would just be that the NFs aren't all just oversensitive snowflakes. Sometimes they have it right, and I think that's where the TP types need to. I think maybe particularly the ESTP type maybe needs to be just a little
Ease
bit
off.
more ease up just a little bit because um, I know that you have to acknowledge that there's ounce scales. That's what you have to acknowledge. You have to acknowledge that not everybody can be weighing a truck and or weighing a human body. Like some people have to weigh marijuana, you know. So
Yeah.
that like because of that difference, if you can't if you have trouble keeping that in your mind, you can steamroll over people. And yes, there's going to be types like INFJs that are probably going to be more understanding of that, but there might be other types or immature INFJs that don't understand that, and they will feel bullied and they will feel hurt by things you're doing. And maybe you don't want to necessarily bulldoze over everybody, even if you do want to be the bearer of truth, and even if you do want to be logical, but maybe you also want to have good relationships and just be
Yeah.
successful as you move through life, right? So there may be some cases where somebody is hurting and you might know that what you're going to say is going to hurt them even further, or you might know they're not hurting but you might still know that what you're going to say has hurt them, but you're just kind of like fuck the consequences. And
Yeah.
that's not always necessarily the best path to go.
Yeah.
So you might have to resist your instinct in that case if you want to think of it from the standpoint of, well, maybe I can have a better relationship with this person and further my agenda by having a better relationship and not necessarily having to be right all the time in this case, in or make them realize that I was right and they weren't right, or something like that, and focus more on this person's hurting. And so that probably would be the advice that I would give as an NF who was bullied, who was hurt, and things like that. Is that sometimes the world is cruel, and sometimes very sensitive people need allies and friends, and it's just, and I think ESTPs are the perfect type to do it. I think because they have a depth to them, they understand the world of feelings, they understand the world of logic, and it's just they don't always want to go in the feelings direction because that's not really
Yeah.
as important. So it's not as good of a shortcut to this successful kind of. But I think the mature ESTP will see the cases where it actually is okay to let your guard down a little bit and to be um, to let somebody who's a more sensitive type just be in their sensitivity and let them be who they are, and to be okay with that. That's my thinking.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna work on that. No, I mean,
Was that
I could
helpful?
validate a lot of what you said. Oh, completely. I mean, the systems thing, especially, you nailed it. That's exactly what I'm working on right now. And I have a mentor he is Mr. Systems, and for lack of a better term. And so, just the fact that you said that, I'm working on it and seeing the results of creating systems way more than just being fly by night or flash in the pan. So, yeah, I could validate for my own personal self. I speak on all of SDPs in the world when I say it tongue, but um, yeah, I think you got yourself another video advice to SDPs or whatever just on that alone. That's great stuff. And you're right. Yeah, like often, yeah, I can confess to maybe, if you want to say bullying, I don't know. I just feel like it's an art project to maybe a more sensitive type, that maybe doesn't need that. It's not even looking for that. It's giving them something they don't even want. They're like, well, I'm not trying to do this, so why are you like pushing me into this thing? So yeah, I think that's pretty fair. So and every type has its role. That's a hard thing to remember. I think it's the SE maybe I don't know. I'm not as versed as in MBTI as yourself. Maybe it's Go over here. And you're just like, people,
Yeah.
I don't walk in a grocery store like that, folks, but just trying to create that sort of vibe for you guys to understand. But it's, yeah, maybe there's a purpose why this person's doing this. There's a
Hmm.
system to it all. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. I saw an interesting diagram, and it was like extroverted sense. It was like showing a wall and like how you would go past the wall, and extroverted sensing just blasts through the wall, and like introverted intuition like stops at the wall and then like disappears and then like reappears on the other side of the wall. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think ESTPs they have pretty good introverted intuition, so it's probably just a matter of using that a little bit more often, actually, and using your extroverted feeling a little more often. That's probably what it is, and just trying to get into the feeling space that other people are in, and use your intuition too, and try to kind of put the pieces together a little bit, and just say, all right, this person's the look on their face plus what they're saying plus what I know about them, and you bring that all together and try to think of it that way uh, instead of logic always. I mean, I like to think I'm a pretty logical person, but
yeah,
sometimes I can get in logic mode, and it's just you
I
can
think so.
be hurting another person and not realizing it if you're not being like, it's funny because ESTPs are always in the moment, right? But it's like still you can kind of miss the what's really going on with somebody. You know what I mean? Even if you're in the moment, but somehow you can miss that, and so that's where that intuition comes in. Is maybe you got to trust your intuition a little bit more, or try to listen to your intuition a little bit more. You know, you might think you're in the moment, but like there's maybe you need to come out of the moment for a second and have some kind of insight about what's going on to try to get to the bottom of it before you start to break through the wall. You know, like maybe the wall doesn't need to be broken through right now. So yeah, that's all.
Yes, I want to highlight that NFJ because that's sometimes when I go to my NFJ friend, he tells me exactly, he's like, Lee, you didn't need to do all this shit. You just see, you could have done it this way. You would have saved like 3 or 4 steps, you know. Meanwhile, like I came out like came out of the jungle with like a dead deer in my mouth. Like NFJ is like, what are you doing, dude? You could have just did like you could have just you didn't have to do it this way. And that's where I respect the NFJ or the EJ. They just they can see things way more steps ahead. It's like, why bother like going through all this stuff when you can just like save less time and do it this way? But I think the drug that is SE to an SVP or an SP or whatever, it's just you're just in it and you're processing things so fast. It's
Yeah.
adrenaline, for lack of a better term, but it's and it's not always like that. I don't go into every target like Bruce Willis, but like when I was trying to come see you today, I'm running late. I'm driving. I don't know. I was driving when I said, "Okay, let's do this while I'm driving," and so I think the intensity of the real world is to your point, and yeah, that's something that imagine if you had mastery over that, and of course the more the FE and the connection with the NI to your point. So, but that's where, like I say, my NFJ friend is always good to hang around to still sort of point out
Hmm.
in a lovingly constructive way, or point out like, hey, you could have fucking saved time doing this, and vice versa. I'll be like, dude, why don't you just go do this, dude? Why don't you just do
Yeah.
it? Shut up,
No, I mean, I
you
think
know?
there's a push and pull there. I don't. That's why I would say I don't necessarily think I want to say change. You know, I mean, you are who you
Yeah,
are. You know, obviously you just want to be the best version of yourself, whatever you can be.
yeah,
You know,
totally.
so I think it's great that your friend has the strengths where you have weaknesses, and you have the strengths where he has weaknesses, and I think that's that's the best possible out. I mean, you're both gonna learn from each other, and yeah, I mean, we can't get through this alone by ourselves, right? I mean, no man's an island, so you really do need to have people in your life that compensate for your weaknesses.
No, I think that's the beauty of the MBTI system is it's almost like we're all X-Men, and every
Right.
type can bring a new perspective or can help you and when you get into relationships, whether it's friendship, romantic, business, with a different type they bring out, there's benefits or
Yeah.
liabilities in some cases if it goes bad, but
Always
or if it's
both.
just
Always
fun,
both. Always
it shouldn't
both.
be
You can't get away from
exactly. So
the cons. You know what I mean? Like there's always a give and a take. So
yeah, it's it's like even Mike Gordon probably told this guy did it a few times. It's just, but yeah, it's not to get corny and kumbaya, let's start a fire, but yeah, like imagine a world without any one type. According to this system, which is still, of course, as we discussed, all hypothetical, but it's imagine. You see the the value that each type brings in. I guess sometimes, I guess you get blind to that in SE mode. When you don't realize this little ENFP over here has got something that could unlock the keys to the kingdom.
right.
For like,
No, yeah,
for lack of a
they're definitely
better
gonna
term.
see it from an angle you can't see it from. So, you know,
Yeah,
if you value perspective,
yeah, just
then you're gonna value that.
like your son. ENTP. Talk about bringing freshness, right?
Right, right.
To the stereotype.
Yep.
And probably giving you a sense of clarity. You get stuck in a trying to solve a puzzle. You go to that ENTP well, get a drink of that water, and it's like, I feel better.
Let me tell you,
So I don't know.
he and I riff off of each other like you wouldn't believe. So, I do think of all the pair ups that people mention, they mention INFJ and ENTP by the way, and I think that's INFJs and ENTPs get along very well. Just put it that way.
I believe it.
Yeah.
My NFJ friend, biggest hero is an ENTP, and he worships this guy. Anything this guy says is the gospel. I'm like, really? I think this guy is a terrorist. No. I'm like, I think this guy, really?
I
I'm
think
like,
it's
bro, really? You
I,
really think that's?
I think that INFJs admire extroverted intuition in a person because we feel so locked up that we have a difficulty doing that improvising that NE DOMs do, and we admire it so much that we're almost kind of hypnotized by it in a way. We're just like, please do that thing over and over again in front of me so I can enjoy it. you know? It's like an
No,
experience.
I think
It's
that.
like an experience to be around an NE dom. They're always thinking about something, or always doing something,
Yeah.
or ideating, and it's like for an NI dom, it's like constant food, you know. It's like there's always sometimes it gets overwhelming, obviously, but I mean, because any DOMs can just go and go and go like the Energizer battery, and like, and if you're an introvert, especially, you're eventually at a certain point you're just like, please leave me alone. But like and sometimes and I
Yeah.
have to withdraw from my son, like I have to withdraw a lot. But I mean, when we engage together,
Right.
when we're together and we do things together, it is so fun and it's so interesting. You know, he's always got some interesting things to say. So, very satisfying
Yeah.
relationship.
I feel, I feel the same when I meet SJs. I feel like I just know how to tickle them and light them up. I feel like
That's funny.
I just throw crazy stuff at them, and they love it. But yeah, I guess that's what makes it go around. But I admire SJs. To me, they're just boss-like. But it is what it is.
All
Um,
right, I think we're probably
well,
at the end of the
Brent,
call.
I honestly,
Oh, go ahead. What were you gonna say? We'll wrap it up
yeah,
after
we're
this.
probably
What
3
were we gonna
hours.
say though?
I was to say we're probably 3 I think that, I guess, sums it up. Like I say, there's someone else. I had a type session just like that. They ESTP just like you, and the ones that have said ISTP, they've said like, oh, you're just an extroverted ISTP, or and who knows? Maybe there is something to the ambivert. I don't know, but a lot of arguments have been made that, oh, you look like you're a default action, uh, so that would dispel your TI. So what I'm trying to say is, I yeah, I think you're right on the money. I guess, I can see it now after a lot more things you've pointed out. So
Cool. And that it's real quick. I'll just end it on the ambivert comment. I think that extroversion is a separate thing, probably to a degree, from MBTI. I mean, like in the Ocean score, you have extroversion, and I score about in the middle on extroversion. So
hmm,
I I don't think it necessarily. I think a lot of other INFJs probably would score about in the middle on extroversion. And I've also met ENFPs and ENTPs that probably would as well. Um, so I don't think that it's a very good parallel necessarily. That's one thing I think is a weakness of MBTI a little bit, is this idea of introvert versus extrovert, because I don't think that fits too well in MBTI. So in fact, if they got rid of that, I wouldn't be upset probably. I think that
wow,
probably the cognitive function stuff probably makes a little more sense, because I don't really have a very good time trying to type people with the dichotomies. I don't really find that works too well. So I would almost be fine with just scrapping it, except that it's just a way that people can use to describe a certain type. So it's kind of like, all right, well, we'll keep it. But like to me, it's just not very useful. So if I don't know if that helps or not, but I mean,
yeah,
I really do think you could probably have a middle extroversion ESTP. You could have a high extroversion ESTP. I doubt you would probably have a low extroversion ESTP, but maybe. I just don't think it would be likely. Um, so that's just how I think of it. I do see extroversion as being a separate kind of bucket to a degree from cognitive preference, which is to me is more about
I
how you process information or something like that.
I see. So you just see the function, which one's firing strong, and which one reacts.
I look at what you're
It's
good
like
at.
a
Yeah, I look at
okay,
what you're good at is probably a good indicator of what you use a lot. That's what I look at. Or what you're telling me. I'm listening to what I think you're what cognitive functions it seems like you're using a lot. But that requires the INFJ kind of read between the lines thing. So that's a hard. It's hard for me to say type people like I do. Like I don't know if anybody can type people like I do. But I mean, because I'm reading between the lines a lot. But that's why I try to put the chart up there to make it transparent, so that if somebody can watch what I'm doing, maybe they'll have an idea about how I did it. I'm not sure, but like I'm just listening. I'm just trying to hear certain clues, like a Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. Like, oh, you just said something. Uh, well, it's not usually one thing actually. But I'll tell you, and I'll give you an example, and then we'll leave it this.
yeah,
Oh, he's talking in generalities a lot.
sure.
Well, that's an NI thing. I mean, NI likes to talk in generalities. Like NI likes to summarize and like synthesize and come up with conclusions and like speak broadly. And, NE is like da 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 da. It's like all over the place. But NI is like broadly speaking. You know what I mean? So when you say something to me that's like universal term of some kind, I'm like, that's an NI statement. And then you say it bunch more times. I'm like, oh, you're just really accustomed to saying these, speaking in universal terms. Well, to me, that means you're probably an NI
Uh,
user. You know what I mean? So that's just an example of like the kind of stuff that I'm listening for when I'm typing somebody, versus the exact thing that they're saying, if that makes sense.
wow. Okay. Yeah, I see. Well, I appreciate the time, Dan. Kicked ass. Got me definitely through the ringer for sure. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're. I would
they're gonna sound off in the
Take your
comments,
time.
and they're gonna subscribe probably, right? I guess, hopefully. Hey, I hit 500 subscribers the
Yeah.
other day. That was nice. Moving on up in
Alright.
this world.
We'll get that up.
All right, so thanks a lot, Lee. I really appreciate the time that you gave me. It was very you're very generous with your time. So, thanks a lot, and thanks for letting us all come into your brain for an hour and a half. That was very nice of you to do.
Yeah, sorry folks, for you got the good, the bad, the ugly.
No, I think it was very interesting.
It is what it is.
I think it was very interesting. So, all right, well, I will talk to you later, and have a good rest of your evening. And thanks everybody at home. Oh,
Alright,
and
Dan.
we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for being part of the channel and everything. So I'm talking to you and talking to them, so that's kind of weird. So all right, take care. Buenas noches.